חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח לדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם. באהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. When we lie down, when we rise up, this joy will last forever. When we lie down, when we rise up, this joy will last forever, forever. אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת.
Oh, good evening, good evening, good evening. Shabbat Shalom. It is such a pleasure to welcome you if you're with us in virtual community. If you are with us in the Beit HaT'filah Temple Emanuel of South Hills, I'm so glad you are with us as we begin our service this evening in song and prayer. Hine ma tov, how good it is that we can be together tonight.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב. לה 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 לה. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
When Dan Rothschild and the community here designed this beautiful space, it did a great job giving us west-facing windows through which we might see the setting sun, and on a night like this, through which we might see the oncoming storm. I don't know if you can see it out of the corner of your eye or not, but there's a good one coming our way, just in case you didn't get enough of that last night I hope that you are safe. I hope that the trees in your backyard are doing a little bit better than the trees in my backyard. But I hope that even when we recognize the great power of nature in a night like last night or in a storm coming such as this, that we do so from homes of safety, recognizing the privilege to be able to say that. It is wonderful to gather here in this space in safety and in comfort, in prayer with each of you as we begin our Shabbat, as we light our Shabbat candles, bringing a little bit of extra light, a little bit of extra warmth into this dark time. It's my pleasure to invite Joan Rothas to join us. Those blessings can be found on page 2. And Joan, we have repurposed the handheld, so I'm going to point this one your way. You're good. Everyone at home will still be able to hear you.
It's a small group anyway. Yeah. As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Just see it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Baruch atah Adonai.
Sure.
Eloheinu
melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
And I invite you to turn now to page 5 as we recognize the sweetness of Shabbat with Kiddush. If it's comfortable for you to do so, I invite you to rise.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu. Shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon inchilanu, zikaron le'maaseh v'reishit, ihu yom techila lamikra et kodesh, zecher etziat Mitzrayim. Anu v'harta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha le'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
L'chaim, you're welcome to be seated. And for those who are in the room, you've noticed the lights flickering. I've mentioned the storm we can see coming our way. For For those who are joining us in virtual community, should those lights flicker a bit too far and take out our internet, know that we are safe, that it is just an approaching thunderstorm and nothing more. I'm grateful for your presence this evening, and I'm grateful for all who are with us. As we turn in our Sidurim now to page 12, there finding words of Lecha Dodi, a melody that we've heard in the past, that we heard last week, that we'll hear again this week, as it is our honor and pleasure to welcome Sierra Fox, our student cantor, for the 21-22 year. Sierra will be with us throughout the year, every other week, give or take, although a little front-loaded with the early high holidays. And we're excited to have you with us as well.
Yes.
Page 12.
Thank you so much. Please join for Lechu Neranena. Lechu Neranena Adonai Nariach Litzur Yishenu Lechu Neranena Adonai Nariach Litzur Yishenu Nikadma Fana Vitoda Izmerod Narialo Lechu Neranena Adonai Nariach Litzur Yishenu Nikadma Fana Vitoda Izmerod Narialo Nikadma Fana Vitoda Izmerod Narialo Lai 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 lai
Though the sun is now hiding behind the clouds, we welcome Shabbat. We imagine it as the mystics did in northern Israel, watching the sunset, greeting a personified version of Shabbat to be with them this day. It's an interesting triangular relationship. Sometimes in our text, Shabbat and God, the Shekhinah, are matched together. Sometimes the Shekhinah and Israel are matched together. Sometimes Shabbat and Israel are matched together. We're all in this together as we welcome the day that serves as our reminder of the glory, the power, the possibility of Shabbat. I invite you to turn to page 20 in your prayer book, these words of Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Shamol v'zachor b'dibur echad hishmianu el hamiyuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shem ultiferet v'litila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha ki hi mekor קדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי כי באורך ומאורי אורי שירה ורי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה.
I invite you to rise.
בואי ושלום עטרת בלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמונה עם סגולה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה פני שבת נקבלה.
With that sense of warmth, with that sense of welcome, I invite you to turn one person to another, to greet one another, to wish one another a Shabbat Shalom at the start of our service. And we continue our words of welcome, our words of greeting, turning our attention to greeting God, ministering angels, words of Shalom Alechem found on page 24 in our Siddur.
Shalom Alechem, Malchei HaSharei, Malchei Elyon, Melech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Boachem L'Shalom, Malchei HaShalom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzidchem v'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh
join me on pages 26 and 27? Entrances to holiness are everywhere. The possibility of ascent is all the time, even at unlikely times and through unlikely places. There is no place on earth without God's presence.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbi.
Amen.
Be'alma difrach yerutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyom echad u'b'chayei techol Beit Yisrael. Bagala u'vizman kariv ve'yimru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'alam ul'almei almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitala shemhei dekodesha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran ve'alma ve'yimru. Amen.
Our Baruch Hu praise can be found on page 28. I invite you to rise if it's comfortable for you to do so, or to rise in spirit as we join in prayer together.
Lai la lai 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 la lai 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 la lai 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 Adonai HaMevorach Baruch Adonai HaMevorach HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed HaMevorach HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed.
Continuing on page 30. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim b'chokhmah poteach she'arim uvidvuna mishaneh itim umachalif et hazmanim umisader et hakochavim b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil bein yom uvein laila. Adonai tzivaot shemo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. And on the top of page 33, would you join me? As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Pages 34 and 35.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
You may be seated.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברתם בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם לארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
A 16th century Italian poet pointed out that when you live by a waterfall, you eventually become deafened to its roar, which echoes words from our tradition from Rabbi Simcha Bunim, who put forward that the biggest tragedy of slavery in Egypt was that the Israelites got used to it. How easy it is to become accustomed to injustice in our world, whether it is happening to us or whether it is happening to others. And when we say words of Michamocha on page 40 in our prayer book, this serves not only as a historical reminder, but as a call to action, to hear the beauty of that waterfall, to see the cruelty of injustice, to make sure that we don't become numb to it, as our ancestors once did, for the ability not to become numb, to recognize the joy of freedom in our responsibilities. We pray these words as part of each service, joining together in song, page 40. Recognizing the importance of companionship to be with us in life's storms, both real and metaphoric, would you join me in the English on the top of page 43? Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. And together on the bottom of page 44.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'dorotam b'rit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'dorotam b'rit olam. B'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'dorotam b'rit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'dorotam b'rit olam. Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'dorotam b'rit olam. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'dorotam b'rit olam.
As Sierra and I become more accustomed to one another's service leading style, permit me just a moment of pulpit privilege. I didn't mean for that to be a test. You did well with flying colors. At top of page 44, always best to go with what we've predetermined as opposed to what comes out of my mouth in any given moment. Sometimes I'm surprised too.
It's the same page. We'll figure it out.
Right, exactly. We know what will come out on page 46. There's only one thing right in the middle of the page. And so as we turn to our Shabbat Amidah, I invite you to rise, to not be surprised, to join with us.
Adonai sifatai tiftach, ufi agit tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'imahot, U'mevii Geula Livnei V'neihem, L'man Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol atah Rav leHoshia, Morid atah, Mechalkel Chaim bechesed, וחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו ישנה עפר, יחמוך בעל גבורות ומדומה לה, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמנת להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים כל יום להללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
There's something to be said for the sound of silence, the sound of the opportunity to take a breath, to be part of the world around us, to hear the drops of rain, to hear the beating of our heart, to hear the words of prayer that only come from within. I invite you to continue in silent prayer, using the words through page 60 as a guide, or adding the prayers that can only come from each of our hearts. When you've finished your silent prayers this evening, I invite you to be seated.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל
Yisrael, may that sense of peace be felt by the people of Israel, the Jewish people of Al Kol Ha'olam. May that sense of peace descend over this entire world. And as we turn to page 253, may that sense of peace as well be felt by those who are suffering from ailments of mind, of body, of spirit. If there are those you are thinking of for our Mishaberach Lecholim, our prayer for those who are ill, I would invite you to share their name, perhaps in the comment box if you wish to do so, perhaps in the space you are, if you're with us in the Beit HaT'filah, as my eyes meet yours, that we might pray concertedly on their behalf, that we might concert our healing actions and energies on their behalf.
Jeff Seraphis, Thomas Stefano. George Goodwin.
Baruch atah Adonai, Rofeh HaCholim. Blessed are you, God, who brings a measure of comfort to all who are ill. We continue, page 253.
Yisheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Scholars of Jewish tradition, all of us, we know that there are many prohibited activities on Yom Kippur. One isn't supposed to eat. One isn't supposed to wear leather shoes or carry from one domain to the other or spend money. There are stringencies of our mourning practices added to the stringencies of Shabbat and our holiday practices. And knowing that makes this story from the Talmud of one sage commanding another to do every single one of these things even more remarkable. After a disagreement over when Yom Kippur fell on the calendar, turns out they debated whether the holidays were early or late from the earliest of times, but make no mistake, this year they are early. Rabbi Gamaliel, from a position of power, commanded Rabbi Yehoshua to violate the day he thought was Yom Kippur by doing each of these things, by traveling, by carrying, by spending money, violating every possible rule. It was a particularly heavy-handed way of proving his point that Yehoshua was so wrong in his determination of the date of Yom Kippur that he could, in fact, have done all of these prohibited activities. Yehoshua complied, actually, though Gamaliel was later deposed from his position of leadership from embarrassing a colleague. But from this story, we learn a really interesting principle of Jewish law. As Rashi states in his commentary to this week's Torah portion, Shoftim, even when you think the highest court has erred, even when you know that the highest court has erred, you still have to follow their ruling, Rashi says. Just as Yehoshua followed Gamaliel's ruling, even though he knew Gamaliel to be wrong. The early rabbis were trying to teach us an important lesson about community cohesion, and they were also teaching us an important lesson about hubris and about humility. In 2017, Time Magazine's Ashley Hoffman interviewed attorney Mike Godwin. Are you familiar with that name? Godwin is most famous, perhaps, for his maxim, now known as Godwin's Law, that asserts that the longer a discussion goes on online, regardless of the topic or scope, the more likely the probability of a comparison to Adolf Hitler or to the Nazis. Godwin's Law bears out, doesn't it? The Holocaust, in American parlance, has become shorthand for good versus evil. It is the epithet to end all epithets, and to listen to contemporary debate, there are apparently Nazis everywhere. Turns out there are Nazis on the Fox Chapel School Board. At a recent school board meeting, one disgruntled parent offered the Nazi salute following the school board's vote to uphold the CDC recommendation that kids wear masks. There are apparently Nazis running the schools in Upper St. Clair. As at the last school board meeting, another aggrieved parent non-ironically compared anti-racist education to Nazi policy. There are apparently Nazis everywhere. I'm being facetious, of course. What is really found everywhere is people who are appropriating the suffering of the Holocaust for their own rhetorical convenience. More than just sloppy analogizing, such false equivalencies dehumanize our school administrators and our school board volunteers who are working tirelessly to help our children be the best possible versions of themselves. They distract from and they shut down the communication necessary to find the difficult compromise on which our democracy flourishes, and they stir painful memories within the Jewish community. You can read more about my personal frustrations in an op-ed that was penned along with Rabbi Jeremy Weisblatt from Ohav Shalom up in Fox Chapel, and with Dr. Lauren Bairnsfather from the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh in this Sunday's Post-Gazette, or I would encourage you to check out an article by Dave Rullo in the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle. When Godwin was asked in that 2017 Time magazine interview how we might begin to stop these grossly inappropriate references, we should be able to disagree about the books students read. We should be able to disagree about the lessons of history or how to interpret scientific data without labeling one another state-supported sponsors of genocide. When he was asked how to stop this, he answered as follows, and I quote, "If I ran the world, I would strengthen both history and scientific education in the United States. If we fostered more self-criticism and more self-skepticism, I think it would do much to prevent rhetorical meanness and mean-spiritedness on the internet, of which Hitler comparisons are only a tiny part," end quote. Mike Godwin and Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, Rashi, seem as if they agree. One of the underlying challenges we all face is the hubris with which we assume that we alone are correct. Without at least a smidge of self-criticism, it matters not whether experts or scientists or scholars or even the great Sanhedrin disagree with me. Without at least a smidge of self-skepticism, I don't even have to countenance another person's perspective, and I can write off those who disagree with me about wearing a 10-cent mask as being Nazis. With this degree of hubris, it's clear how these formerly United States of America have fractured. I possess no answers for how we might step back from this brink. That would be an act of hubris. But I do have two suggestions for first steps. First, we need to request, we need to repeat, we need to ensure that everyone, regardless of their inflamed passions, the strength of their conviction, refrain from using Holocaust analogies unless they're talking about the Holocaust. We've got an obligation, particularly where our children are involved and we're talking about them in public ways, to model the behavior we would hope to see in them. Second, though, we have to remember the story of Gamaliel in Yehoshua. Even though Gamaliel got his way, even though his interpretation was deemed correct by the majority, even though he had a position of power and forced everyone else to comply, he was later deposed for the way he treated his ideological adversary. Everyone needs a bit of self-criticism and self-skepticism. It's an important lesson from this week's Torah portion about hubris and about humility. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I invite you to turn back in your Sidurim at this time, back in your prayer books, to words of Aleinu L'Shabach. You can find these words on the bottom of page 282. And when you have found your page, I would invite you to please rise.
Aleinu l'shapeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
You may be seated. On the bottom of page 290. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. As we prepare for words of Kaddish Yatom, our mourner's Kaddish, on page 294, we remember those who have passed away at this time in years past. We remember those in our congregational family whose yahrzeit occurs this week. Geraldine Berger, Harriet Burke, David Berman, Rosalind Blumberg, Ann Gold Cooper, Benjamin Frank, Gail Goodman, Paul Green, Shirley Greenberg, Barbara Grice, Gertrude Heater, Bertha Hirschfield, May Kaufman, Samuel Kindler, Gerd Leston, Victoria Levitt, Mildred Lupovitz, Minnie Miller, Ruth Daniels Meal, Sarah Myers, Ruth Paddock, Morris Pollan, Judith Rodney, Wendy Rosenberg, Ray Rosenthal, Mimie Roth, Bernie Roth, Samuel Salute, Frida Ruth Schwartz, Lily Shear, Milton Slavkin, Rose Lubell Stolzer, Elaine Tropp, Clara Udrin, Mildred Wellens, and Ken Winograd. If there are others whom you are remembering this Shabbat, or if I have inadvertently mispronounced the name of a loved one, I would invite you to share their name at this time. Yehi zichronam livracha, may their memories be for us an everlasting blessing. We hold their memory in our hearts as we rise and join as a community, affirming words of Kaddish Yatom, our Mourner's Kaddish, page 294. Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, Me'alma Divrach Hirutei, V'amlich Malchutei, B'chayehon, V'yomechon, Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'gala V'zman Kariv V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabbah Mevorach, Leolam Ulamei Almaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar V'yitalev V'yithalal, Shemei Dekudusha Barich Hu, Le'elah Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tush V'chata V'nechamata, Damiran V'alma V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru, Amen. May God, who makes peace in the highest of heavens, make peace for us and for all who mourn. And together we say, Amen. You may be seated. Just a quick word of announcement this evening. Hopefully you have received in the mail or checked out online our High Holy Day magazine. I think we're on Plan F at this point in our planning, but Plan F does entail hopefully being together in the sanctuary for our traditional Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services, if at all possible. We reserve the right to make that change at the last minute if something were to change here in Allegheny County, but that's still what we're planning for, as well as having a robust online option for those who either wish to join or who aren't comfortable being in our space with other people. We haven't forgotten about you, and we'll make sure that this isn't a meaningful high holiday all around. We're so excited to have Sierra with us for Shabbat, for the High Holy Days, for many Shabbatot and weekends to come. I hope you'll take the opportunity to introduce yourself, to get to know her. We're so fortunate to have you, and fortunate to have you leading us in our closing song, the words to which can be found on page 321.
Adon olam Hashem alach, v'terem kol yitzir nifra, v'et nasa v'chevtzo kol, azhay melech shemo nikra, v'acharei kichlot hakol, Levado
out of darkness, Shabbat infuses our spirit. May good companionship, good food, good rest, a good day be with you all as a light through a dark time. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat.